Hey, I'm Dean and this is Legacy Voyage. In Season 1, I'm documenting my journey to earning my first 100K net worth as a full-time college student. Join me as I share some of the lessons I learned along the way.
Bro, this weekend was an absolute roller coaster. That might have been probably one of the most stressful 24 hours that I had in a while. The most stressful time was probably the time I went to London and found out I tested positive for COVID, but still went on the plane. But that's a whole nother story. Maybe I'll tell that in the future. But in this 24-hour trip, I want to give the rundown on what happened this weekend. Basically, ages ago, and I mentioned this in the last podcast, that I was headed to Utah over the weekend for this Nexus event. I was trying to meet up with a bunch of Pacific Islander founders that I connected with on LinkedIn, brought them over to a Slack channel, and then from there, just wanted to meet up, discuss things, hang out, see where things go. And it was going to be the Utah Warriors rugby game. So I planned that out ages ago. And then finally, come Friday, and mind you, this game is going to be on Saturday. So come Friday, I had this whole, a formal thing. It's basically prom, but in college. So I had that. And I was originally going to skip it, honestly. Turns out that I'm hanging out with some friends, and they were like, bro, you should pull up and hang out and stuff. And so I decided to stay and then catch the first flight out the next day. But I was really valuing my sleep, so I was checking the flight. But I value my sleep, so I was checking flights for Saturday, and I really wanted to catch an afternoon flight. So I booked myself an afternoon flight. Luckily, because I fly standby, both flights were open, the morning and the afternoon. So I was like, you know what, I'll just take the afternoon one, get a little bit more sleep tomorrow, Saturday, and then I'll be chill. So formal, this thing goes from 5 p.m. until late in the night. I'm talking till midnight, and then even after that, it's after party where everyone's just hanging out and stuff. So it goes to 2 a.m. So this formal thing, this prom for college, this thing went from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. is when I finally went to sleep. Because after I came back, I still had to pack and do all those things. And then I realized that I didn't have a ride. I was going to land in Utah and then just be stuck there. Either have to Uber or catch a train or something, because I didn't have a ride to get to where I needed to go. So I called my uncle up. I'm like, yo, how's it going, man? Can you pick me up tomorrow? And honestly, I mean, it's just what family does. So he was like, oh yeah, for sure. Just let me know when you pull up, and then where do you need to be? And then I'll drop everything and then come over. I was super thankful for that guy. And he was like, oh yeah, and thanks for the heads up. And I was like, oh man, a day before is a crazy heads up, but you're welcome, man. And he was like, no, for real, because my brother went to Utah one other time and literally called him the day of for a ride. And so we worked things out, and I figured out that I couldn't go on the afternoon flight, because if I did, then he wouldn't be able to pick me up. So I had to go on the morning flight. So the whole time while I was at formal, in the back of my mind, I was thinking about that flight that I would have to change, because I have to switch flights from the afternoon to the morning one. And not only that, but I got to get home, pack and everything, and do what I need to do before leaving the next day. And I have to wake up way earlier than I normally would have if I did the afternoon flight. So all these things were going through my mind as I was at this formal. And it was honestly pretty sick, because it was on a boat this year, and we were cruising down the Chicago River. The lights and the view was amazing. It was pretty cool. The music was kind of scuffed, but the event, the idea, it was pretty cool. So eventually we go through the whole formal, finally get home, and then it must have been 1 in the morning, so I finally reached my room, got my stuff packed and everything, switched myself onto the afternoon flight. I got myself a ride to pick me up from Utah, and then I decided I'll just catch the bus the next day to get to the airport. And so I get a solid 4-hour nap in before waking up at 6:30, and then caught the bus, headed to the airport, caught the flight, which was at 9 in the morning. So finally, I'm sitting at the airport, and I'm sitting at the gate, dead tired, because all I want to do is just go to sleep. I mean, I only had 4 hours of sleep that night. But while all of this is happening, keep in mind, I still have finals. This week, I just finished one of my finals today, but this entire week I got finals. And so in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, I still gotta write my paper that's due on Wednesday. Really, that's probably in 4 or 5 days. Still gotta write that paper. Still gotta study for the 2 exams that are coming up this week. And so all of that is in my mind, but literally I was dead tired. Even on the bus, on the way there, I dozed off completely and completely knocked out. And I barely woke up in time for the airport. So we pull up to the airport where the bus stops, and then people get off the bus, and I'm already eye shades on, headphones on, music playing. This is my sleep secret. If you ever want to knock out on a plane, this is the combo. Get eye shades, noise canceling headphones, play some like soft, slow music, and that's my secret. Just get slumped. So I'm knocked out on this bus, and then I feel it's not moving, so I wake up, I pull down my eye shades, and I see we're at the stop that we're supposed to be at. And as I pick up my stuff to get off the bus, he starts going. And I'm like, hey, I wave my hand, make some noise in the back of the bus. I was like all the way in the back. And he was about to leave, but luckily I woke up in time and waved him down. So he let me off. I made it to the gate okay, and I'm waiting there. I'm dead tired. And so I finally get on the bus. I finally get on the plane, and then I find out that I got first class. And that was super hype. So I got first class. I was able to knock out the entire 3-hour flight because I was just dead tired. Knocked out the whole time. I finally land in Utah around, it was like 11:30, 12 p.m. And this is where the entire trip was like a 24-hour trip in Utah. So I land around 12 p.m. From there, my uncle picks me up, and then we just head to his place. As I'm there, I'm just like doing homework, writing the paper that I need to get done. We grab some food and wherever. And then we finally start driving down to my sister's place. Because mind you, like Utah, I didn't realize it was pretty big, especially like in Salt Lake. Because in my mind, I think of Salt Lake as like the entire area, but there's like Salt Lake, and then there's like Lehigh and Provo. There's all these different places down there. If I was going to meet up with my sister, who's like an hour away, so we start driving down there around 2, finally get there around 3, and then we play some pickleball. Pickleball, by the way, that was pretty fun. That wasn't a bad time playing pickleball. I might join like the pickleball club out here in Northwestern, but that was a dub. And then after that, I forgot to mention this. So after that, I grabbed dinner with someone, and that was around like 5 p.m. when we grabbed dinner. And the guy who I grabbed dinner with, I connected with him a day earlier. So literally on Friday, I hopped on a call with him. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be in Utah, by the way, tomorrow. And he was like, oh, then let's grab some food or something, or dinner. And this dude, his name is Frank. I honestly don't know how to pronounce his last name. It's like super long. I know how to pronounce it if I see the words, but I don't have it in front of me. His last name is super long, but basically, he's a Polynesian Pacific Islander building Polystrong. And Polystrong is like this super cool event summit thing where they bring in all the big dogs. All the big dogs that I've connected with, like Five Eye and Ian Folau, Golo Wolfgram, all those big dogs. Brought them all in. They did like a keynote speaking session, gave them some awards. It was a pretty sick thing. And they've been building this nonprofit company for like the past 7 years now. And so they like built this Polystrong brand. And I was talking with him. We were talking about like his vision for what Polystrong can be. And I was talking about what I was up to and how I'm meeting all these cool Polynesians and Pacific Islanders building a lot of cool stuff. And my goal is to just like connect them all. And his goal is to connect them all. And so maybe we might do something with him in the future. I might go under the Polystrong brand, or we might do like a partnership or something. But really, I don't know. We're just trying to figure all that stuff out. That dinner was a dub, honestly. That was definitely a dub. That was from like 5 to 6:30-ish. And while we're there, I forgot to mention this part too. I didn't have a ride to the rugby game. And so I was hoping that he was headed to the rugby game, but turns out he wasn't. So he was headed home, and I was like, oh, dang. Well, can I call my uncle? Can I call my sister? Who am I going to call to get me to the rugby game? And I decided, I'll just catch an Uber, quick $20 or whatever it was, and then headed down to the rugby game. And I was like super, super early. I got there around like 6:30 to 7-ish around that time, and the kickoff was at 8 p.m. So as I get there, I'm just walking around philosophizing, trying to think about the stuff that we talked on at the dinner, what we could do in the future, maybe partnerships or stuff like that. And then I send a message to the group chat, to the Slack channel, like, oh, if you guys will pull up, then let me know. Because we're all supposed to meet up at the game around 7:30-ish, because I got everyone's tickets, and then we're going to go in. And so as I'm walking around, I got my headphones in, and I'm just canceling out all the noise, and I'm trying to focus and philosophize. And then as I'm walking, I'm locked in, and then I hear Dean. I turn my head, and it's one of the guys who pulled up. So I said, what's up? Great to meet you. Thanks for coming, all that stuff. And then eventually 7:30 rolls around, everyone pulls up, and we watch the game. Rugby game was phenomenal, by the way. I mean, it was amazing. The Warriors didn't win, but it was a super close game. I think they went into overtime, or they barely missed overtime because one of them got a try at like 81-minute mark, something like that. But after the game, we got to connect with them. Everyone went home, and I still had to figure out, okay, who's going to be my ride, because I didn't have a ride by then. And so I was chilling there from game ended around like 10:30. I was probably chilling there till like 11:30. And I spent that entire hour just trying to finish my paper, and I ran into some folks that I knew from Oregon when I used to live out there. Then I finally get home, probably around like 1 a.m. to 2, and I finally knocked out around that time, like 2 a.m. And while I was doing that, I didn't even figure out flights for the next day because I still had to come back, do all my finals, finish my paper, because I had finals. So I decided, I'll just catch the afternoon flight the next day. And after that, it was pretty smooth sailing. Knocked out, hopped in the car, went to the airport, and then took off at 12 p.m. the next day. So that was like a 24-hour trip that was it felt so jammed packed. And I think the reason it felt so packed was just because, like, all the things that were in the back of my mind, but also, like, this was legit flying by the seat of my pants. Like, I was literally just living in the air, going with the flow type. Like, I didn't have a ride to anything, and I figured things out day of, and there was a whole bunch of things that I was trying to juggle and stuff, but it was a good experience. And that's kind of the story for this one. This one's more like an actual story of what happened in the past weekend and those 24 hours. But now on to the next part of the podcast, which I'm adding. This part is going to be L's of the week. L's that I took this week, because I think we can learn a lot from the L's. And it'll be cool, honestly, to keep track of all these things, like all the failures that I had, so I can look back and see, oh, this was what came out of that failure, that L. But I think the first L that I want to talk about is about this trip, because I just told you, like, the rundown of everything. Like, it was super exciting and super awesome. It was great meeting everyone to the rugby game and having dinner and all these things. But now comes the real of, in the background, I think what most people don't want to talk about, and what I probably wouldn't talk about if it wasn't for this podcast. First of all, of course, my sleep was just terrible. Like, I was dead tired through all of this. Not only that, is when my sleep is this bad, it usually leads to binge eating. It usually leads to my mental health being out of whack, to all the things being completely crazy, like everything spiraling downhill. And so, of course, my health was just not there. And it honestly was pretty overwhelming, because I had all these things going on in my mind. Like, how am I going to get to the game? And even, like, this time I didn't even mention, while I was at the game, I was scanning people in, and I realized I couldn't bring my bag in. And I didn't know where to put my bag because I didn't have a car. And so I thought I was just going to have to, like, leave it out in the open or try to hide it somewhere in, like, a bush or something and hope no one steals it. Luckily, one of the guys let me use his car, and I just threw it in there. But really, I think probably the biggest L that I took this past weekend was that a lot of people who I invited, or who I wanted to come, who said they verbally committed to coming, they weren't able to make it for one reason or another. Maybe they had, like, other plans. Other people straight up just didn't respond. Other people were sick, or their kids were sick. And so what was supposed to be a meetup of 10 Pacific Islander founders turned into a meetup of 3 founders, or really 4, which, honestly, saying it out loud now is like almost a 50% conversion rate or success rate. So I guess that's a dub. But that was honestly the toughest part, is because it would have been so cool if everyone who agreed to come actually did come. That would have been amazing, because, like, being in a room, and it wasn't even a room, just being in, like, a row or in the same area and meeting in person all these cool Pacific Islander founders, I just think that's just awesome. And it's exactly the vision that I have. And so that was probably the biggest L, is just not being able for everyone to come. And it's honestly something that I'll take into the next thing, because after the game, I was low-key, like, down in the dumps, feeling bad for myself and all those things. And then I realized this, like, word of wisdom or something that I heard from some startup lecture or something like that. But it basically said a rule of thumb with startups is that you should be embarrassed to release your MVP, because if you're proud of your MVP, it means you're moving too slow. And I think, not sure how much that applies here, but I just took that to heart and leaned into it. I was like, you know what? Even though this wasn't as phenomenal or as amazing as I wished it would have been, like, it was definitely an MVP, meaning minimum viable product, just something to see how people feel about this thing, or if this is something that generates any type of demand in the first place. And I was definitely embarrassed by it. So, not necessarily embarrassed, but it was definitely something that I wouldn't, how do I say this? It wasn't the proudest thing or the most perfect thing that it could have been. So that was an L. And by the way, when I say, like, taking L's, I think L's are actually pretty cool, because something else that happened, and I think I talked about this in the last podcast too, but, like, there was this guy who came in, one of the other college kids out here, and he's talking about, oh yeah, I got the Forbes 30 under 30, millions of views on TikTok and all these things. And it was like, after he said all that, he went on to, but these are the things no one talks about. And these were the failures I had. Like, TikTok barely makes any money. Startup is pre-revenue, so I'm not making any money there. All these things. And in that same presentation, he was like, the small wins are cool, but the big failures are even cooler, because those are where the most learning happens. And I can undoubtedly say that I learned a bunch in taking that L over the weekend, especially as I'm trying to reset the vision I have for this network community thing that I'm trying to build. Another L definitely that I took really over the past week, 2 weeks. Because in the last podcast, I mentioned like straight up, there was one night where I stayed up till like 2, 3 in the morning just playing Minecraft. Because every now and then I get like this huge Minecraft kick. And so I got that huge Minecraft kick again. And I realized it was like a big Minecraft epiphany because it's an L that I like stayed up that late just playing Minecraft and stuff because that really doesn't amount to anything like in the real world. But I did realize that as I was playing this thing, I love building. Because like when I'm playing these types of games, Minecraft and Assassin's Creed, these are like the games that I usually play. And Pokemon was another one. Whenever I play those games, the thing that I like the most is building. Like in Minecraft, you can build these farms, and with these farms, it can like be an iron farm or a gold farm or an experience farm. But as you build these farms, what they do is they create resources. And so if you put in X amount of time into these farms, then you should get out these X amount of resources. And I realized that I do that in most of these games, like Assassin's Creed. All I wanted to do was put in, like, I knew 30 minutes doing this mission got me this amount of money, which I could put towards this skill, which would in turn get me more money, and all these different things. Like in these games, I loved building and I love finding ways to make in-game money. And I realized that the same feeling I get from building like a farm in Minecraft, I get the same feeling when I'm like making podcasts like these, or building a website, or building a landing page, or writing a sales script, or writing a LinkedIn post. Like I realized that it's a very similar thing in that both of those things are just building something. And I should probably I'll probably philosophize about this more, but this idea of building I think is interesting because I define entrepreneurship as building something people love or building something that people want, preferably something they pay money for. And that term building, it can mean a lot of different things because it doesn't necessarily have to be me going in and writing the code and stuff. It could be me recruiting the people who write the code, or it could be me cooking a burger because the burger is the big product and that's the thing that people love. But I just had that epiphany as I was playing Minecraft, and I realized that the same effort that people put towards video games or people put towards school, I realized how much they can translate between different domains. And that when someone who's like super addicted to video games, for example, when they shift that focus into a different domain like business, how successful they could be in that different domain. And I've seen this firsthand because I've experienced it, like shifting my focus from building Minecraft farms, because I think like, I don't know, I just like building Minecraft farms, like redstone farms, all that stuff is fascinating to me. Shifting my focus from there to building the startup or to building this website, I found that shifting that focus is actually where some pretty cool things can happen. And so that was a pretty cool epiphany that I had. And on to the next part of the podcast is the philosophizing section. These are just things that I've been thinking about, some big takeaways. But I wanted to give an update on what I was talking about last episode when I said I'm sorry. I told this story. I think it talked about how like I was telling how my day went, and then this other person said I'm sorry. And I realized that I was conflating two different meanings of saying sorry. In one sense, I thought that person meant like apologizing kind of sorry, where they're willing to change, because like if I accidentally took your chocolate or something, and that chocolate was meant a lot to you, and I say I'm sorry, then it means that I won't take your chocolate again. I'm willing to change. I'm apologizing for what I did. But there's this other sense of saying I'm sorry where if I say I lost someone that is super, super close to me, and another person says I'm sorry, or I'm sorry for your loss, that's not necessarily them apologizing. That's not them saying, oh, they're willing to change, because there's nothing they can change. This other sense of saying sorry is like feeling sorrow. And sorrow, I think the dictionary definition is just like feeling grief or sadness for some unfortunate event or situation. And so I wanted to clear that up because I'm now realizing that I didn't make that clear, or I didn't fully understand that in the last episode, because now looking back at it, it's kind of like a compliment. Like if someone says, in this sense, if someone gives you a compliment, or someone gives me a compliment, it's not my place to take that compliment, throw it to the ground, spit on it, start stomping on it, and then try to hand it back to them. Like that's not what I'm supposed to do with compliments. And in the same way, like I think when someone says I'm sorry in a sorrow way, I don't take that saying that they just gave me, which is like condolences basically. I don't take that, throw it on the ground, stomp on it, spit on it, pick it up, and then try to give it back to them. I think if that happens, then I say thank you. Like thank you for feeling sorry, or thank you for your condolences, stuff like that. And so that was just something that I was thinking about more because I was conflating those two meanings. But the reason I talk about that is because I really want to focus on blame this episode, because I've been philosophizing about this thing for a while now. Because in this sense, I talked about how when someone says I'm sorry, when they are apologizing, they're trying to take on blame. And I've been thinking about this because it seems like power follows blame. It follows the finger. Like if I point the finger to the government, or if I point the finger to my parents and say it's their fault that I'm like this, and there's nothing I can do to change it because they were the reason why this happened. If I do that, then in that sense, I'm giving them all of the power. Like here's another example. If I point the finger, and I'm going to use a personal example because I think those probably hit home more. If I blame my childhood, and let's say it was something like someone wronged me, something like that. In my childhood, some terrible thing happened to me, and it's because of that. I blame that for why I turned out this way. Then in that sense, it seems like I'm giving that experience all the power. And what this does is it takes all of the power away from me, because what can I do to change that? There's nothing I can do to go back in my past and change what happened back then. And in a similar way, like when I point the finger to the government, or I point it to like my parents or a teacher or somewhere who's outside of my control, then I'm giving them all the power. I'm like, well, here's actually the perfect example. I just thought of this, and this one really hits home. Whenever I am surrounded by a lot of food, like cookies and pizza and all those things, I usually point the finger to my environment, and I say, I blame my environment. Like the reason I binge eat, or the reason this happens, is because of my environment. And in that sense, I'm giving power to my environment, because I can't change my environment. Like I'm just there. And so whenever I come into that environment again, come into the same context, then there's nothing I can do to change that. And so I think it's two things that I see this as. In one sense, there's this, connecting it back to last episode, there's this idea of like epistemic blame and practical blame, where epistemic blame is all evidence-based. Like if you look at the evidence, yes, the government may be doing stuff that holds you down, or yes, the system might be holding you down, or yes, your parents might have done this, this, and this to hold you back. All these different things that epistemically, like looking at the pure evidence itself and weighing that out, sure, like you can blame that. But there's also this idea of practical blame. Like practically speaking, if you look at what you blame, and in some ways blaming myself has helped me gain more power, because with blame, it implies a sense of like agency and free will, because it implies that things could have been different. Like for example, going back to the cookie, if I steal your cookie and that cookie means the world to you, and then I give it back and you blame me for stealing your cookie, in your head, you're thinking about how things could have been different. Like there could have been a world where I didn't steal your cookie, and so that's why you would blame me for stealing your cookie. And I'm connecting it back to this because this idea of practical blame and blaming myself for doing something like binge eating, for doing something like going off my diet and all those different things, I think it actually is powerful, because what it does is it forces me to recognize that there is free will, there is agency involved. And so I have the agency to act differently. It's not like I go into the same context and I blame the dining hall for me binge eating. Instead, it's me blaming myself for binge eating because I have agency to not binge eat. And so first of all, it makes me open my eyes to say, okay, I have agency because things can be different. Like there is a world out there where I don't binge eat. So that's the first thing that it does. And the second thing that it does is it gives me the power to make that choice. Like I recognize that agency is there. Now, by putting the blame on myself, it helps me make the choice that will help me in the long run, that has quote unquote cash value that pragmatism is all about. But I do want to recognize that this form of thinking, like this practical blame, could definitely be harmful. Even just going with this binge eating example, I think if I feel like shame around it, I think shame is probably where it gets super unhealthy, because I can put blame on myself without putting shame on myself. And so I don't have to feel shame. I can feel guilt, which is like I did a bad thing, versus shame, whereas that says I am a bad person. But I think blame can actually be like it could be seen as in a positive way, where blame is like an empowering thing. If I blame myself, then I'm taking responsibility, because the way I define it is I think blame is responsible for the outcome. And so when you blame me for taking your cookie, you're making me responsible for that outcome, which is taking your cookie. And in that same sense, when I blame myself for overeating, it means I'm taking the responsibility for the outcome of overeating, meaning I can take responsibility for setting things right and pushing myself towards a healthier habit. I think I can also make this distinction between, instead of blaming my environment, it becomes blaming myself for putting myself in that environment. And so maybe it is like the environment forces me to do some type of behavior, do some type of habit. Like maybe the dining hall is like, okay, if I ever go to the dining hall, then I most likely probably will binge eat. And so in that sense, I could just avoid the dining hall altogether, and I could blame myself for going to the dining hall. And that helps me not binge eat. And even saying that right now, that's actually a pretty good epiphany that I might stick with. And then the other thing I had concerning this whole blame idea is that in situations of blame, there is the blamer and the blamed. There's the person who is doing the blaming and the person who is being blamed. And what I'm suggesting is that with practical blame, in most situations, in most cases, it's probably better for these two people to be the same person. And namely for those two people to be myself. That I am the blamer and I am the blamed. And in that way, I can take responsibility for the outcome. No matter if it's a good outcome or if it's a bad outcome, like in both situations, when I am both the blamer and the blamed, I can take responsibility for the outcome because I have the power, I have the free will, the agency to make things different and to point things in a different direction. So that's kind of the rundown on blame. I'm still trying to work through things, and I probably will get clear on some of these ideas in the future, but I thought that was low-key kind of powerful when I was thinking about blame and connecting it back to like apologies, because when someone apologizes, it means they're taking on blame for doing something. Or in some sense, in some situations, they're taking on blame, which means they're taking on responsibility for the outcome. And honestly, thinking about it right now, in some ways, it'll probably be powerful to apologize to myself. Like when we apologize to ourselves, not only are we taking responsibility for the outcome, so we're putting the blame on ourselves, what we're also doing is telling ourselves that we're willing to change, that I won't let this happen again, or I will try to not let this happen again. And so that's kind of powerful, actually. Like telling myself I'm sorry for going to the dining hall and binge eating. I'm sorry for not sleeping early, like not taking care of myself, because when I don't sleep well, it leads to all these different things. That's pretty powerful. And it gets to this whole other discussion and topic that I've been talking about is like the alter ego and the dream identity and all those things. But this episode is probably going a bit longer than I anticipated. So we'll move on to the next one. Next thing I've been thinking about is this idea of products versus byproducts. And so I think most people will probably know what a byproduct is. Like with bees, if a beekeeper is trying to produce honey, what they'll do is they'll gather a whole bunch of bees, and the bees will make honey. I don't know how it goes, or don't know how it happens, but eventually you get a whole bunch of bees together and they make honey. But a byproduct of them making honey are these things that they make in the honeycombs, which is beeswax. And this is what they use in like candles and cosmetics and all those things. But in this scenario, in this analogy, the beeswax is a byproduct. Like it's not the main focus. It's just something that just so happens or coincidentally is made because of their primary product. Their primary goal is to make honey, and beeswax is just like something that's made as an afterthought or alongside it. And the reason I was thinking about this is because I mentioned in the last episode, like this is exactly what I think sleep is, where if your entire goal is to sleep, and like I'm trying to go to sleep and I'm telling myself, go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep. It turns out that telling myself that isn't really helpful. Like I will stay up because focusing on sleep and making that the product, like making that the main focus, it just keeps me up. And I said happiness is the same way. Like if happiness is the product, if that's the main goal, then it seems like if you focus on like, I'm trying to be happy, I'm trying to be happy, I'm trying to be happy. And while doing that, you realize that the gap between where you are and where you want to be is unhappiness itself. Like that is what it means to be unhappy. Then you realize that making that the main goal, making that the product isn't really helpful. There's a whole bunch of other examples where I think this applies, but I think recognizing what is a product and what is a byproduct. And so I think sleep is a perfect example. I think sleep is just like a byproduct. It's something that just so happens after you get in bed and like clear your mind or however things go. Like happiness is just a byproduct after you're super grateful for things in life and you take care of yourself and all those things. Success is a byproduct after you have put in the work and put in the effort that create results. And so I think Bezos talked about this, or he was like, at Amazon, we don't focus on the KPIs. We don't focus on the results or the outputs. We put all our focus into the inputs. And so he shifts the focus from the outputs, from the goals, into the inputs or the systems that create those goals. And so I was thinking about this a lot. And so, to me, it sounds like the inputs is what I should focus on as the product. Like that is the main focus. And with that being the main focus, it leads to some byproducts, some things that just so happen to come about, some secondary outcome, which are the outputs. An example of this is like success. I was listening to a podcast and it was talking about, oh man, everyone would love a gold medal, right? Like, I would trade anything for a gold medal. And then you realize that in order to get that gold medal, it comes with the 5 a.m. practices and the eating healthy and eating right and missing family events and no video games and all these different things that come along with that success of having a gold medal. Like, there's a price tag related to it. And that's what got me thinking about this. Like, success isn't the product. Success is a byproduct. And it's a byproduct of good habits that draw you closer to this idea of success. And the way I define it is like pursuing your dream identity and stuff like that. But I think this is pretty helpful, and I'll keep thinking about it, like products versus byproducts. And when we make our focus, when we make the product our inputs, our habits, and that is our main focus, then it leads to some byproducts, and some byproducts of like success and happiness and all those things. They just so happen to be a secondary outcome of our main focus, which is the inputs. So that was that update. And then real quickly, some other things I've been thinking about. First of all is weighing evidence. And I realized that evidence is like very subjective, actually. So what counts as evidence for you might not count as evidence for me. And so like, well, what happens to both of us? You might look at it and be like, oh, that was a spiritual experience. Or I might look at it and like, oh, that was a spiritual experience from God. Like, that was an answer to a prayer. And someone else might look at that and be like, no, it wasn't. That was just a coincidence. So in that sense, like, evidence is very subjective. And along those same lines, rationality is very subjective. Because not all of us have the same access to evidence. For example, this is an analogy I heard a while back, but let's say a person is convicted and they're standing on trial because all the evidence points to them murdering someone. Like, they have the blood on their hands, they got the knife with their fingerprints on it, all the evidence that's pointing to them that they murdered someone. But in that person's mind, like, they have no memory whatsoever of murdering that person, of killing that person. And so in that sense, they're still rational because they have access to this evidence in their mind, their memory. And if they know that their memory usually isn't wrong or it hasn't been wrong in the past, then they can usually rely on it. And if their memory tells them there's no way that I killed this person, then that person is probably rational to believe that they didn't kill the person. And everyone else in that courtroom is probably rational to believe that that person did kill the other person. And this just illustrates this idea that we have access to different amounts of evidence. Like, for example, someone who is LDS, who is a member of the LDS church, like super committed member, they might have access to this piece of evidence of like a spiritual experience. And that's the main reason why they believe in the first place. And in that sense, they may be rational because they're weighing the evidence, like that spiritual experience outweighs everything else. And someone else, like I might come along, or a scientist might come along and be like, no, that was just like some coincidence. That didn't really happen. That just got me thinking about this idea of evidence. And then the last thing that I really want to quickly end off with is defining gratitude and fear. I'm not sure if I brought this up in the last episode, but for some reason I got thinking about this because in my eyes, I say gratitude it's when you can imagine what life would be without. Like, when I say I'm grateful for my mom, or when I say I'm grateful for the weather, it's because in my mind, I can imagine, or I can at least try to imagine what life would be without. Because without my mom, like, there's no way that I would be where I'm at today. Without, like, this good weather, then there would be bad weather. And I don't like bad weather, so I'm grateful for the good weather. And with that same definition, I got thinking about fear, and I think also defining fear in this way, it's when you can't imagine what life would be without. And so the reason I fear, going with this example, the reason I fear losing my mom is because I can't imagine what life would be without her. I can't imagine losing her and not being able to call her on the phone and being able to hear her loud yelling and cooking her amazing food and eating that. And I think that's what fear is. And so I just thought it was like a pretty good way of operationalizing those two definitions that I was thinking about. And cool. I think that was all the parts for the Philosophizing section. This might be one of the longest episodes I've ever done. But moving on to the updates. Life update. Let's see. Starting off with myself. I think I gave kind of the rundown on what happened this past weekend, but that was a rundown on everything there. I'm definitely going to try to focus some more on my health, especially like moving forward, like physical, mental, spiritual health, all those things. Because truth be told, like last 2 weeks, I just been staying up, playing Minecraft, eating ice cream, all those things. And I felt the repercussions of that, especially on this trip, because I was just dead tired the entire time. I wasn't able to be myself, and it took a toll on me for sure. I think the way I plan on doing that is focusing on tiny habits, because what I've been trying to do lately is implement 5 to 10 habits that will hopefully help in every domain of my life. But what I'm deciding to do is I'm going to take it a step back, focus on one habit. All I'm going to do is focus on one habit after I get the habit locked in, then I'll move on to the next one. Then I'll move on to the next one and the next one. And hopefully with this like super hyper focus on one habit, hopefully that will help me take these slow incremental steps towards the person I want to become. And these like 1% improvements, because I was reading Atomic Habits and I just got to the section where it talks about this like 1% improvements every day. And it's kind of insane to think about because like these 1% improvements are compounding. 1% improvement every single day means we're 37% better, I think is what the number was, than we were before. Like an entire year of 1% improvements leads to that much of a better outcome. And so I'm trying to think about this, like 1% improvements every day toward the person I want to become will eventually lead to me getting closer to the person I want to become. Like, I think that makes logical sense, right? So I'm gonna try to run with that and really focus in on those habits. So that's probably the biggest update on my physical health and myself. In terms of update for my people, it's definitely gonna be nice, honestly. This weekend, I'm gonna be hanging out with the fam out in Seattle, but I'll finally be able to like take a step back from school and stuff and then really just be in the moment. Hopefully is to just be able to be present as I'm taking care of myself better and be with my people. So that's the hope. And then last update with my work, I think I gave the rundown on that one too, like last weekend, first Nexus event. And honestly, I've just been meeting with more and more people. And here's what I've realized with building this community is that so many people are honestly super willing to build these communities. And these people have been building communities in the first place. Like earlier today, I met someone who's at Microsoft and he's building the Pacific Islander community out there. And one of the dinners I had was with someone who's trying to build this community like globally. And another person who I connected with on LinkedIn, they're trying to build this community at LinkedIn, or not LinkedIn, at Deloitte. And so these Pacific Islander communities, they're being built. And I realized this kind of subconsciously, but I never like really locked in on this idea. But as Pacific Islanders, we're super well connected in our immediate networks, in our immediate groups. Like I'm decently well connected with my family or my like Vegas community. And then like, so you have this Vegas community and then you have like the Utah people and then you have the Alaska people and then you got the Chicago people and all these different groups that are super fragmented. And what I realized is that what we need is like a meta group, like a community of communities. And so we grab all of the community leaders in those groups, we bring them together and we have them on this platform, because then we could start like bridging the gaps and really consolidating our numbers and consolidating all these fragmented groups. And so that's what I was thinking about. And the other thing is that like my focus has definitely been all over the place, because with Roots is I think the new name that I'm calling it, or Nesian Hub, with this startup, like I'm just like all over the place with things. Like, are we going to be a media thing? Are we going to be a directory thing? Are we going to be this and that and the other? And I think I'm really going to lean into this network idea, like trying to build this network of Pacific Islanders, because these networks are already being built. What isn't being built is a global network that can connect communities together. So that's the update there. We'll see how it goes. Finishing up finals this week and then back to Jumpstart. I think it's on the 15th, so that's like 2 weeks from today. Something like that. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, this whole thing is just recording the journey and keeping y'all in the loop. But I'll see you in the next one. I record these episodes completely free to share success with everyone. So the only thing I ask is that if you learned anything or found something interesting in this episode, just leave a review and share it with a friend. Only takes 5 seconds and it would mean the world. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next episode. Tatok, see you.